Hi, and welcome to another Well Workplaces podcast. I'm Tom Bosner, your host, and today I'm here again with Dr. Natalie Flatt. Nat, how are you?
I'm well, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, really good. I'm feeling pretty excited today to be talking about naming your emotions and why it's great for your stress response. But I must admit that as a dude, I went to an all boys school and come from a background probably where you don't really talk about your feelings and your emotions that much. So today's topic is a little bit semi-intimidating for me, if I must be, if I'm honest with you.
It's all good, Tom. I won't be. I don't want you to feel intimidated right now. But you know what? You've actually named that emotion, so that's a good start.
Oh, yeah, okay, go me. Because I was saying before that, like, as a guy, like sometimes when you talk about your feelings or your emotions, you kind of have happy and sad, and then the rest is like, yeah, I don't know, I don't know exactly what that is. We might dive into this pretty quickly, I guess. So, what it is called is affect labeling. Have I said that word right?
That's correct. It's a very nice, pretty psycho jargon word, which simply is described as putting feelings into words. It's a way of confronting our emotions rather than avoiding them. And look, we get in that pattern, don't we, Tom? Is that when if you're anything like even myself, when I feel upset or when I feel really frustrated, you can actually practice a form of emotion regulation, which is called reappraisal. And what this is, it's the reappraisal is really the subdomain of distancing. So where we try and reduce the magnitude of what we're feeling through a distraction or through a behavior. So, for instance, when I'm feeling really frustrated or overwhelmed, I might spend more time exercising, or might spend a bit of time eating if I'm feeling really, insecure. Maybe if I'm a bit sad, I might find that it might be easier to watch a sad movie. Okay. I have some of those distractions, and I put that as a default, and many people do, just to give yourself that mental space. But this behavior, whatever you're doing, this distraction, it doesn't serve the solution to what I'm feeling because I'm not acknowledging it. I'm actually just behaving in that way. It makes me feel good in the moment, but it may not then make me feel good afterwards. So this is where affect labeling can come into play, because the clearer you can understand the emotion that you're feeling, the better you're going to be able to control it and to regulate it. But what can you do to have that clear understanding of emotion? And that's where we want to be able to label it and basically expand our understanding and our emotional vocabulary, to be able to identify what's going on in our life right here, right now. And when people, can label their emotions, it's got some really cool benefits for our brain.
Yeah, that's cool. I like it. Really cool. I've been watching. I don't know if you've seen this show on Netflix. It's called Squid Games. I've been getting right into that, and it's this sort of. It's quite horrific to watch in some ways. There's a lot of gore in it, and I'm watching it at not like last night. We watched it probably right before bed, and so last night it was just traumatic dreams for me last night. So I must be watching that for some sort of escapism or something maybe. But it's certainly like taking up my afternoons until I finish it. So it's kind of like going on a binge watching of TV, sort of a distraction therapy for some people. Do you think at the moment as well?
It can be. I mean, that can be definitely feeling just overwhelmed and exhausted. And that's your mental space out. And funnily enough, I'm doing Squid Games as well. And isn't it interesting that that violence that show is actually showing, on that psychological kind of thriller there, is certainly interesting. And it's something that I've been hearing a lot of, is that escapism can be a really good way of distraction. But if there is an underlying emotion that needs to be addressed, if you're doing that, is our needs getting met? I suppose Netflix have already figured that one out, and more often than not, that's why they just keep on putting some extra seasons on to kind of keep you in that loop of continual watching there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point about tech, how it kind of just keeps pulling you in, and I guess by being so distracted, you then not really having that time to settle yourself down or even just think about how you're feeling. So that's quite interesting. Now, you mentioned that with affect labeling, that it's and naming your emotions, that it's I guess, great for relieving the stress response. So is there some sort of effect that it has on your brain or your neuro system? Is that sort of how that works?
Absolutely, Tom. It's actually quite amazing. It's like the simple form of actually being able to name our emotion. Research just shows that at the amygdala, where it holds all our emotional response, actually is really it basically is lessened there. And when our limbic system settles down, that allows us to move out of that essentially that emotional response, and then it allows us to move into that prefrontal cortex, into our emotional regulation. So we're able then to find other ways or better ways to be able to manage that emotion when we label it. So it's quite fascinating. So from a neurological and physiological change, it is that they see this increased activity associated with that emotional regulation, and that decreased autonomic nervous system. So like the decreased heart rate, that cardiac output, we're just seeing these huge benefits in that way. So we're not really working, I suppose, in that adrenal response. We can see when people are starting to feel really angry, how they then act upon that anger actually puts the body in a state of play, which is again that fight or flight. When they can name the anger or say that they're frustrated, or what's behind the anger, which might be disappointment or humiliation or shame or guilt or embarrassment, being able to identify that and then name that actually just takes us out of that adrenal and that fight or flight response, and then into that problem solving ability, and overall has a better health outcome. And that's all by naming an emotion. So we then have this behavioral change, and we see that we've got even better performance coming out, like even with students. If they can name that they are feeling quite overwhelmed before they take an exam, or they're feeling really anxious, or they're feeling really worried, or they're feeling really apprehensive, if they can then name that emotion before they go into the exam, what research is showing that post that exam, they actually get an increased test performance than those who didn't even name that emotion. So it's really got some great merit and some great research out there. But your non-conscious mind, it can process that data to produce this effective self-knowledge. And the more we can do that, the more we practice this, the more lucid and refined our understanding, or our emotional understanding, can become, which is really the basis of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, well, great summary there. And for those that are listening to this, we've actually pulled up some brain anatomy images here. So if you are listening to this, head across to the YouTube if you are interested in just having a look at how this actually works. But yeah, just on the fight or flight, Nat, could you give us a quick summary of what that is, just for those that haven't maybe heard of that before, the fight or flight response?
Absolutely. So we've got, like, in the fight or flight, you'll see, like, in a little, you've got the amygdala in the brain, near the brain stem there, and that's where all of our emotional responses is held. That's where we can hold that emotion there, and that's part of a bigger part of the brain, which isn't labeled on this one, but it's called the limbic system. And the limbic system is our lizard brain, dare we say. So that's our fight or flight. That's what's created and allowed us to be the top of the food chain. When this is activated because we're in a threatening situation, or a situation we may not fully understand, our body goes into that automatic drive there. It gets us out of that situation, or it allows us to respond in an emotional way. But it sometimes can be really confused, because all it's trying to do is just to get us out of this situation, or to be able to manage this situation. When we're saying is that we can, and when the limbic system is on, the front part, our prefrontal cortex, is actually switched off, and because both can't be activated at the same time. And the prefrontal cortex is where all our organization lies, where our memory, formation, creation, and organization also lies, but also, most importantly, our decision-making processes and our solution-focused processes there. So that prefrontal cortex, all that, albeit that came later in our evolutionary path, it's very important for us to be able to not for that to be activated. So if we have our lizard brain activated, this becomes really foggy, dare I say. And we want that clarity there. Now, to get that clarity, you've got to switch off the lizard brain. So what studies have actually said is by labeling your emotion, that takes you out of that lizard state, that takes you out of the fight or flight state and reduces that response to then allow these cogs to turn at the prefrontal cortex, which is going to be able to go, okay, how can I manage this situation better? This is my emotion. How can I manage it? And that's where we get the more positive behavior outcome there.
Yeah, cool. That makes heaps of sense, and just how you've described how the prefrontal cortex is so crucial to decision making kind of gets me thinking around performance here and the potential performance benefits of just being a little bit more aware of what you're going through emotionally and then being able to label it, which probably brings us to a good point here to kind of go, so if someone's listening to this, how would you go about, I guess, this exercise of labeling your emotions? Maybe it's a dumb question, but how do you do it?
It's not a dumb question all the time, because it is something that I think that we're not used to. And it's like anything, wellness is, albeit is our best resource that we own right now, from the circle of control we were chatting about last week. It requires a lot of discipline. And it's all about awareness, isn't it? And it's becoming aware. So, if you were to walk into a room, that might have been really overwhelming, or you even need to present to, start paying attention to your mind and body, and to figure out what distinct emotion that could best describe what might be going on inside of you. And if you can then notice and identify that emotion, whether it is something like, this is resentment, this is contempt, this is guilt, this is shame, this is envy, this is embarrassment, this is humiliation, whatever it is, it's going to be then important to then, you're not going to be then stuck in that fight or flight state. So essentially you're going to have a better performance outcome as well. The great challenge here though is to not blurt out or even, write down on a piece of paper what you're expecting to feel, in such a situation. So like, for example, we can live in a culture where the word anxiety is thrown around quite a lot at the moment. It doesn't actually mean if we walk into a room that we feel anxious. Okay, that's mean what you think that society might think that that's what we feel. So you've got to differentiate between what culture expects you to feel and what you're actually feeling.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point on anxiety, because it's become well known as a core issue. I've definitely heard people talk about, I feel anxious, and I feel like if we were to go a little bit deeper, maybe that's maybe not the thing. Maybe there's something else to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of my clients, I recommend using an emotion wheel. And I think I've flicked one through to you. This is just an example, which I've just,
here it is. Yeah.
These off the net. You can get as a little poster. You can put these on your fridge and everything. But the more you practice this, by going from the core emotions that we are born with, and then what might be hiding behind the emotion, this is going to be able to expand your emotional vocab. So therefore, your emotional intelligence is going to build, and the easier it becomes. So it's a great way to prompt you on how you're feeling, and also just to kind of also learn about, hey, you know what? I never actually thought of it that way. I feel angry right now, but you know what? What's behind my anger right now? Or I'm feeling fear right now, but what else, what might be behind that fear? So it allows you just to, talk about, other areas that you may not have considered that has an emotion label to it. And then it's all then about taking stock about, well, now that I've labeled that, what was the behavioral outcome? What happened essentially? And then I always say to my clients, look, go that next step. Like once you actually had that behavioral outcome that hopefully was a more positive experience, how do you then feel from doing that? So it's emotions an amazing component. It's that expansion of that language, and what it can lead to can be incredibly beneficial to many people. But you don't always have to say it. You might think it. Okay, you might, it can also be, speaking to friends, speaking to family members, writing it down in journals, or even using it. And what we do a lot with employees and teams, even when they do daily stand-ups at the start of each, daily stand-up, use one word to describe how you're feeling right now. And even doing that, it brings a sense of calmness, even just to the room, but it also then creates a sense of empathy, because you're not only getting to know yourself, but when others are doing it around you, you're getting to know them and their emotions. Because we're very good as a society also to be able to hide it from our facial expressions, and we can't always rely upon that.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that example of doing it in meetings. We actually did that as a team last week. We did a quarterly meeting, a quarterly review, and then planning ahead. We used Mural, which is a piece of software. This might not be as perfect as how you've described it, but there was these little on Mural. You can basically pick. You can select emojis to then sort of describe how you're feeling, and then following that, we all kind of just talked openly about what we are feeling. And it was probably organically, it was the first time where we've really got a little bit deeper into what we are actually feeling. And we've got with team members in different parts of Australia. So it was quite interesting. And then also after the meeting, we kind of then did a recheck. All right, how are we feeling now that we've done our plan together? We maybe weren't feeling great at the start. What are we feeling now? And that was also a really perfect and nice way just to round it out, because it was all around how we were feeling before and after the meeting. And the reason we were able to do it is because we were using a bit of software actually that kind of prompted us, but it's something that afterwards I was like, wow, we just need to do this every meeting now, because there was so much value in it. I think as well, for maybe couples and, couples and family members, even just going a little bit further into what's really going on, or not what's really going on, but how are you actually feeling? Are there any
Oh,
questions that you could ask someone to just sort of prompt them along? Maybe if you had sometimes getting those combos where it's like, how you going? Oh yeah, I'm okay, or like, I'm all right. What do you suggest there? Is there a way to
you know
go a
what?
bit deeper?
It's lead by example, Tom. Because if you said to someone, oh, how are you going? Oh yeah, I'm well today. Oh, how are you going? Oh, you know what, I'm actually really excited. So then tell me a bit about why you're well, just to kind of, they may not have that vocab themselves, but you can then show that you've got that vocab, and the next time you talk to them, they might actually expand on that word, because we all know the word fine. How many emotions can that have behind it? I also do it with my children. My children have to describe three feelings that they've been going through in the day. Like, tell me how was school? They're not allowed to come home saying school was good. They are not allowed to come home saying, how was school? Oh, it was amazing.
Wrong
Was it?
answer.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like, what else do they use? That thing like, oh, my 8-year-old is coming in. You think, oh, it sounds like a bit of a show off. Now I was inspired today. I'm like, well, tell me how you're inspired today. It was a happy. I felt happy at school. Like I felt welcomed at school. Like, so they're starting. I'm starting to really expand their knowledge, and I've got that little emotion wheel on there, because the more that even, and I've got two boys, so I have to kind of push on that language for them to be able just to explain how they're going, and they come home, they'll go, I feel really proud today because I drew a picture that everyone clapped and said that it was really good. So it's about practice, like it's about anything, and the more you can practice it, and even yourself, like when you're trying to express how you're feeling about a certain situation, try use 3 emotions, and that's going to then be able to expand your knowledge and your emotional vocab a lot quicker.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like, now that we've reviewed what the hell affect labeling is, we also reviewed how it impacts your brain. I feel like with that neuroscience lens on it, and if people can understand the huge benefits of being able to do it, that being performance, but also just being more in tune with what's going on, there's some real, I guess, benefits for relationships as well that's really worth looking at. So thanks, Natalie, so much for your time today. That was really, really interesting. And I'm going to get that wheel and I'm going to attach it somewhere. I'll probably attach it into the show notes and probably on my wall as well, and have a good practice myself, because I need to expand on my own vocabulary here. But yeah, thank you so much again for your knowledge. It's really amazing to share that with the community. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Take care. See you later.
Awesome. Bye, Tom.